Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. On the back of an election victory, Benjamin Netanyahu is posed to become Israel's longest-serving prime minister. What will his legacy be? A talented politician who polarized society, isolated Israel in the world, and refused to make peace with the Palestinians, and then eventually made war with Iran. To CrossTalk the elections in Israel, I'm joined by my guest, Norman Finkelstein in New York. He is a political analyst and author of the new book, Method in Madness, The Hidden Story of Israel's Assaults on Gaza. And in Jerusalem, we cross to Gil Hoffman. He is the chief political correspondent and analyst at the Jerusalem Post and talk show host on voiceofisrael.com radio. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules. In effect, that means you can jump in anytime you want, and I very much encourage it. Gil, if I can go to you first in Jerusalem, what was this election all about? Because a lot of people will say this was the true face of the Israeli electorate, or as Gideon Levy wrote immediately after, Netanyahu deserves the Israeli people and they deserve him. What is your take?
This is a victory of mainstream Israel over extremists like Gideon Levy and an international community that tried to force its way on the people of Israel. The people of Israel voted to have a government that will work on improving its economy, and that will work on bridging the gap between rich and poor in this country, and that would work on keeping Israel safe and secure when there's crazy things going on in our region, when journalists in other countries are getting their heads chopped off. And so Israelis wanted to have a leader who they believe, rightly or wrongly, keeps them safe and secure. And Netanyahu really enforced that message over the last few days, and it's sunk in.
Okay,
and
all right.
So they're going to get a government.
But the international community looks at those last few days in a very different way, if I could point out. A lot of people point out that Netanyahu used very divisive language, racist language, some would say, and he didn't run on a campaign of equality. He ran on a campaign of security. Norman, what is your take about, let me go back to the original question, the true face of the Israeli electorate. Why did they vote for Benjamin Netanyahu when polls days before had him down?
Well, all the analysis show that in the last few days, Benjamin Netanyahu ran on two particular points. Number one, no to a Palestinian state. And number two, he was engaged in racist fear-mongering, telling the Israeli Jewish electorate that the Arabs were voting in droves and that you have to go out to stop this Arab piling up at the polls, and that's what swung the last about 4 or 5 percentage points in Netanyahu's favor. Now, I agree with Mr. Hoffman that crazy things are happening in the region, that's for sure. You have the crazy ISIS in Syria and elsewhere. You have the crazy Saudis, and you also have, of course, the crazy Israelis. I'm not going to sing patriotic songs to the United States. We have our racial problems for sure. We have racist police. We have a racist judicial system. But the fact of the matter is, in the last 2 elections, the American people twice elected a black person to office, an African American. In the case of Israel, they've just elected the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan into office. There's a lot of lunacy going on in Israel, and the election showed.
Excuse me, in this election,
or the true face of the Israeli electorate.
Okay, I mean, again, we go back to, how do you feel about that, Gil, about the tactics that were used in the election at the very end here? Because, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu said years ago that he believed in a two-state solution, and then he just pounded away that he's against a two-state solution. I mean, how do you, account for that changing of position? Or maybe he never believed it ever, okay? He was just saying the truth in the end.
Netanyahu is still in favor of 2 states for 2 peoples. I think that his words were taken out of context, and in fact, he actually clarified it in a report that was broadcast, in an interview that was broadcast on MSNBC in the United States on Thursday afternoon, America time, Thursday evening. Israel time and Russia time. In that interview, he talked about how he does still support a Palestinian state. What he was talking about was how he doesn't envision that one can be created under the current circumstances when there's all these crazy things going on in our region with 200,000 people being killed in Syria, and when there's genuine fears that any land that Israel withdraws from will be a base for Hamas or ISIS to take over and attack Israel. And I want to talk about that true face of Israel, Peter. The true face of Israel is Ayman Uda. Ayman Uda is the new leader of the Joint Arab List, a party that is now our third largest party in Israel, an Arab party that calls for equal rights. And the Arabs came out in droves. That's part of our democracy. What Netanyahu was warning the traditional right-wing voters that vote Likud was about outside interference, that the international community was paying to have these Arab voters go out and try to beat Netanyahu.
So they did come out in droves, but I mean, Norman, if I go back to you about, external influences, I mean, what was Netanyahu doing in Washington, D.C.? I mean, well, that's an interesting external influence in American politics. Go right ahead.
Well, Gil gives a good insight into the nature of the Israeli mentality. He's telling us that the entire world, every single world leader who said that Netanyahu came out against the Palestinian state, everybody is wrong. Everybody's suffering from an illusion. Everybody's suffering from a delusion. The New York Times is wrong. All the world leaders are wrong. But actually, Benjamin Netanyahu came out in favor of two states. That's the Israeli mentality. It has nothing to do with the real world. It's clear Benjamin Netanyahu never supported two states, and now he came out openly against it. And the Israeli electorate, because it's not just Mr. Netanyahu, but it's all the parties to the right of Netanyahu who oppose two states, they form a majority of Israel. We've been told for years and years that the Israeli people, they actually support two states. But if you look at the opinion polls, 75% of Israelis support annexation of the major settlement blocks. 75% of Israelis support Israel's retention of the Jordan Valley. 75% of Israelis support keeping all of Jerusalem for Israel. That's not two states. That's one state plus for Israel and a garbage dump for the Palestinians. That's the Israeli electorate. That's the reality. If you want to understand Israel as an American, all you have to do is look at the American South before the Civil Rights era. The same meanness, the same vicious racism, the same sense of superiority. But in the case of Israelis, it's not just superiority when it comes to Arabs. There's this kind of Jewish supremacy, Jewish superiority when it comes to everyone. That's why when Mr. Netanyahu came to Congress, the first people to back out, the first Congress people to back out, were the Congressional Black Caucus, because they immediately sensed that this is not just a Jewish supremacist. This is a vicious, filthy racist who was slighting the President of the United States because he was African American. Everybody knows if George Bush had been in power, and if George Bush had been in power and not Barack Obama, Mr. Netanyahu would never dare carry out that stunt.
Okay, Norman, let's...
He did it
no filibustering, no filibustering. I want to go back to... I want fair time. Let's go to Gil. You want to react there, Gil? Jump in. That's the point of the program.
I mean, that's just crazy, everything he said. Not a single word he said was right. Israelis are not racist. We took Africans from Africa and brought them into our country and made them part of our government and our diplomats and our lawyers and our judges. The country that's racist that brought blacks to their country as slaves is America. Okay, there are just as many blacks in the Knesset as there are in the Senate.
Gil, I want
important to understand.
Let's clarify, though. Okay, let's be honest. Let's stay with the facts here. Okay, that's a vision of Israel that you accept here. But the settlements that are being built on occupied land are for Jews and Jews only.
But before you
Is
get
that-
to the settlements,
is that
I was supposed to be given an opportunity
okay, can you just
to
answer my
respond
question?
to Norman,
Can you
who's
answer that
accused
question?
my prime minister
yes or no?
of
Because
going to Congress. I'm going to answer your last question before you get to the settlements, which is an important topic that I'm looking forward to discussing with you.
Okay, go quickly, because I don't want any
Netanyahu went
filibustering
to
and wasting
Washington
time.
in order
Go
to
ahead.
wake up the world against an Iranian nuclear threat that poses a threat to Israel and Iran. That poses a threat to Israel and the United States and the international community. And that speech was effective in making sure that the international community would subject that agreement to greater scrutiny. Now, about what Norman said about the Knesset and about support in Israel for a Palestinian state, okay? We just elected a Knesset 2 days ago. In that Knesset, the amount of members of Knesset from parties that are against a Palestinian state is 8. 8 out of 120. Those are the numbers. It can't be denied. It happened 2 days ago. There was a party that ran further to the right called Yachad that was vehemently against a Palestinian state. How many seats did they get in this new Knesset? 0. That's Israel.
Okay, Norman, you want to react real quickly before we go to the break?
But here we have another example of the Israeli connection with reality, or how tenuous it is. He's now telling us, after Mr. Netanyahu ran on a platform which explicitly said no to a Palestinian state and won what's been called now an overwhelming victory in Israel, we now have Mr. Gil Hoffman come on your program and tell us that the support for the opposition to a Palestinian state is 0 in Israel. That's what he's telling you. Opposition to a Palestinian state.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to
120.
continue this in the second part of the program. We're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the Israeli election. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the election outcome in Israel. Okay, Gil, I'd like to go back to you on a topic that I mentioned, that I broached in the program in the first part, and that's the settlements. And this is something the international community, and very broadly the international community, is very concerned with. Every single year we have a vote at the United Nations General Assembly, and we have, growing support in Europe and in elements in the United States that's saying that Israel can't have it both ways now. So you fully expect, from what you've said so far on the program, that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be like Nixon goes to China after all these years and come up with a peace settlement.
That's not what I said.
Okay, I'm suggesting it. Go ahead.
That in an interview.
Go ahead.
Okay. What I said was that Netanyahu is indeed still in favor of 2 states for 2 peoples. The current reality in which ISIS is taking over, has already taken over a land area 20 times the size of Israel, does not permit concessions to be made on the Israeli side. The Palestinians are not interested in coming to the negotiating table and talking to Israel. Israel was talking to them. They left the negotiating table and went and made a deal with Hamas, which is recognized by the European Union, America, and countries around the world as a terrorist organization. It's no doubt that Israel would like to continue talking to them if they will come back to the table. There are no indications that they will. And when they come to the table, of course, one of the things that's going to be decided is where the final border is going to be.
Okay.
And then there's going to be Jews on one side and Arabs on the other.
Okay.
Except that on the Jewish side, there will be an Arab minority that will be protected, and on the Arab side, there will not be a single Jew.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Norman. Jump right in here.
Gil.
You know, I've almost wanted to ban the term peace process here because it's gone nowhere for decades. Go ahead, Norman.
Gil, you're really embarrassing yourself. This is not Israel. You're on a program which is broadcast to the entire world. How can you be saying the things you're now uttering on this program? The Palestinians don't want to negotiate. it's the Palestinians that are the obstacle. You know full well that your prime minister said no to a Palestinian state. You know full well that the Israeli electorate, using the language of Israel now, overwhelmingly voted for that prime minister. You know full well that the Palestinian Authority has been trying desperately to find a two-state settlement of the conflict now for about 30 or 40 years. Well, before the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, already as far back as 1976, 1978, the Palestinians were trying to negotiate that settlement. You know full well that Israel's the obstacle, not because Israel is evil. It's a very simple fact. Israel has a cost-free occupation. The Europeans pay the bills in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority does the dirty work. It imprisons Palestinians. It tortures the Palestinians. That's called security cooperation. And the United States protects Israel diplomatically at the UN and other international forums. And so why should the Israelis withdraw? They get to have their cake. They build these luxurious communities in the occupied Palestinian territories, stealing the water resources, stealing a lot of the most arable Palestinian land. They get to relocate with government subsidies in the occupied Palestinian territories, and they get nothing and they lose nothing. It's a cost-free occupation. It's probably the first cost-free occupation in the history of humanity. And so why should the Israelis withdraw? There's only one way to bring about a two-state settlement, and that's to make Israel pay the price for its illegal, immoral, and inhuman occupation of Palestinian territory that now has gone on for nearly a half century.
Okay, Gil, do you want to react to that? Because the mantra about the conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is a two-state solution. That has been with us for a very long time, based on 67 borders. But we have winds coming out of the European Union that have said they've had enough watching this charade going on right now. Norman says it's been a cost-free occupation. Do you think that those days are going to come to an end, or you can just keep going the status quo?
I think it all depends on the Palestinian leadership. While the Israeli Arabs were voting in droves and as part of our democracy, their Palestinian brothers were jealous of them because they have not had an election since January 2005. It's not because of Israel. It's because of the Palestinian leadership that doesn't want to have a democratic election and the international community that's not encouraged it. Abbas was elected in January 2005 to a 4-year term. He has now been in power for more than 10 years. He turns 80 next week. And people who are 80 don't change their spots. They're not going to come to the table and start giving things up. In September 2008, Israel, with Ehud Olmert, a left-wing leader, offered the Palestinians 100% of the West Bank with land swaps, offered to take in thousands of Palestinian refugees, even though there were a lot more Jews expelled from Arab and Muslim countries when Israel was created than there were Arabs who fled in 1948 when the Jewish state was created. And he offered to divide Jerusalem, have the Arab neighborhoods of Jerusalem become the capital of a Palestinian state, and take the old city of Jerusalem and internationalize it under the control of 5 countries: the United States, the new Palestinian state, Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. That was what the Prime Minister of Israel offered the Palestinians in September 2008. Had they accepted it, they would have gone to the UN General Assembly, where every country in the world would have voted for it. They missed that opportunity.
Okay.
The reason why you don't have a deal is because you keep on having Palestinian leaders let their people down.
Okay, they let them down. Norman, do you want to react to that historical expose we just heard there?
Yeah, the problem, Mr. Hoffman, is he counts on the ignorance of your viewers. But I'm sorry to report to you, Mr. Hoffman, I'm fully cognizant of the record, and now I'm going to go through it. Number one, he did not offer 100% of the West Bank. He wanted to keep what's now called 8.7% of the West Bank, or what's effectively the major
I said with
settlement
land
blocks
swaps
would go to Israel. About 8.7% of the West Bank, including the major settlement blocks, which would include the critical water resources, would go to Israel. Some of the most arable
There's already an agreement
land
on water
would go
that was
to
worked
Israel. Israel would be the Palestinian state would be bisected in the north. It would also be bisected at its waist with a settlement Ma'ale Adumim stretching from Jerusalem to Jericho. You say he offered to take back thousands of refugees. Let's see exactly what he offered. He offered to take back 5,000 refugees. Now, there are about 5 to 6 million Palestinian refugees. He offered to take back 5,000 refugees, 1,000 refugees each year over a 5-year period under what's called family reunification. And in fact, that offer was made informally, and Omar was already going out of office because of corruption scandals. So there was no possibility that that offer, totally unsatisfactory, totally unacceptable, but even that
You won't be satisfied until there's no Jewish state at all. I know you. I know your history.
Mr. Hoffman, if you know me as you claim to know me, you'll know I'm very conservative on this question. I support international law, 2 states on the June 67 border with a just solution of the refugee question. That's what the United Nations General Assembly, about 165 members, say each year. That's what the International Court of Justice says.
If you have millions of refugees coming from all over the world, there's no Jewish state.
All right, gentlemen, let's move forward here. Gentlemen, no, we're rapidly running out of time here. Gil, if I can go back to you. Do you foresee a kissing and making up between Tel Aviv and Washington, particularly with Mr. Obama?
I see the American people supporting Israel. All the polls do. I see.
Can you
Democrats
answer the question about Obama?
Israel.
Can you answer about Obama, please?
I'm answering the question.
That's what I asked about. No, but I'm asking about Obama.
The answer to the question about Obama is no.
Okay.
The answer to your question about Obama is no. Obama has decided to not to put, to try to put pressure on Netanyahu. That's not something that Netanyahu is going to accept. But as soon as Obama's gone, things are going to be better.
Norman, what do you say to that? Because does it really matter to the Palestinians what relationship there is?
There's another example of the Israeli mindset. Mr. Obama is trying to put pressure on Netanyahu. Mr. Obama, along with the 4 other permanent members of the United Nations Security Council and Germany, have been trying to negotiate a diplomatic settlement with Iran. There are 2 countries in the world which oppose that diplomatic settlement. 2 lunatic countries which oppose diplomacy
Canada
and want
Australia?
to go to war. They are the Wahhabi jihadis in Saudi Arabia and the Jewish jihadis in Israel. Those are the bookends. Saudi Arabia and Israel want to go to war. The rest of the world wants a diplomatic settlement. And then Mr. Netanyahu barges in on the U.S. Congress in order to humiliate Mr. Obama. Mr. Hoffman, again, I'm not a flag waver, but do you really think the American people need Mr. Netanyahu to hold up his Looney Tune, Daffy Duck cartoons to explain to us diplomacy with Iran? Excuse me, but we're smart enough
I have the polls
to
about
figure
America.
these things out.
70% support Netanyahu's position, not Obama's on Iran.
Without Mr. Netanyahu's Looney Tune
All right, gentlemen,
cartoons.
we've run out of time. Most Americans do support a 2-state solution. Many thanks to my guests in New York and in Jerusalem. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules. Sorry.